If you've recently inherited a house, you're probably asking yourself one question over and over again. What do I do now? Do I keep it? Do I sell it? Do I rent it? Fix it up first? The problem is the moment people find out you've inherited a house, the advice starts pouring in. One family member says, never sell real estate, just keep it. Another tells you, get it on the market before something goes wrong. Someone else insists you need to remodel the kitchen before you even think about selling. And while almost everyone means well, some of that advice can end up costing you tens of thousands of dollars. The truth is, inheriting a house usually isn't just a real estate decision. It's a financial decision, a family decision, and for many people, it's one of the most emotional decisions they'll ever make. If you've recently lost a parent, grandparent, spouse, or another loved one, let me first say I'm truly sorry for your loss. I know making major financial decisions is probably the last thing you want to deal with right now. But unfortunately, it's often during seasons like this that people make decisions they'll look back on and wish they had handled differently. Over nearly 20 years in real estate, I've had the privilege of helping many families through situations just like this one. And one thing I've learned is that the biggest mistake usually isn't selling too soon, and it isn't waiting too long. The biggest mistake is making a permanent decision before you fully understand your options. Maybe you've never owned an investment property before. Maybe you're the executor of the estate, and suddenly everyone in the family has a different opinion. Or maybe you feel guilty even thinking about selling because it somehow feels like you're letting go of the person who lived there. If any of that sounds familiar, you're exactly who I made this video for. One thing you'll learn about me is that I don't believe every homeowner should sell to an investor like Hero Homebuyers. Sometimes listing the property is absolutely the better decision. Sometimes keeping it creates the most long-term value. Sometimes renting it makes perfect sense. My job is not to tell you what to do. My job is to help you understand your options so you can make the decision that's right for your family. By the way, if we haven't met, I'm Fred Paskell, president and founder of Hero Homebuyers. For nearly 20 years, I've helped homeowners throughout the Houston area navigate situations just like this. Everything I'm about to share comes from real conversations, real transactions, and real families facing difficult decisions. So today, I want to walk you through the biggest mistakes I see people make after inheriting a house. And more importantly, I want to show you how experienced homeowners think through this decision so you can move forward with confidence instead of uncertainty. Because the first mistake has almost nothing to do with real estate and everything to do with human nature. One question I hear all the time is, so what are you going to do with the house? It's a fair question, but it's usually the wrong question to ask first. The better question is, what information do I need before I can make a good decision? That one shift in thinking changes everything. I've seen families keep a house simply because selling it felt emotionally impossible. I've also seen families sell a house almost immediately because walking through the front door was just too painful. Neither decision is automatically right. Neither decision is automatically wrong. What matters is why you're making it. After helping families through this for nearly 2 decades, I've noticed something that surprises a lot of people. Emotions have a way of disguising themselves as logic. Someone says, I think we should keep the house. But underneath that is often, I'm not ready to let go. Someone else says, we should just sell it and move on. But underneath that is, I can't keep reliving this every weekend. Those feelings are completely understandable, but they're not financial strategies. And when emotions quietly become the ones making the decisions, that's when expensive mistakes usually happen. Here's what I encourage families to do instead. Separate the emotional decision from the financial decision. Give yourself permission to honor the memories without feeling like you just have to keep the house forever. And give yourself permission to sell the house without feeling like you're letting go of the person. Because those are two completely different things. The memories don't live in the walls. They live with the people who shared them. Once you separate those two decisions, everything else becomes much easier to evaluate objectively. And that's when you can finally start asking the questions that actually lead to good decisions. But even after families make that mental shift, I still see other mistakes that cost people an incredible amount of money. And it usually starts with the best of intentions. The second mistake is trying to improve the house before you've decided what role it's going to play in your future. This is probably the mistake that costs families more money than any other. I can't tell you how many times I've walked into an inherited house and someone immediately starts pointing things out. We need new carpet. The kitchen is outdated. We should repaint everything. The bathrooms have to be remodeled before anyone has even decided what they're going to do with the property. They're already spending money on it. Here's something I tell homeowners all the time. Before you spend a single dollar, decide where you're trying to end up, because the right decision depends entirely on your goal. If you're planning to move into the home yourself, making improvements may make perfect sense. If you're planning to keep it as a rental, your priorities are completely different. If you're planning to list it on the open market, you'll want to focus only on improvements buyers actually value. And if you're considering selling it as is, many of those repairs may never pay you back. The destination becomes the roadmap, not the other way around. I worked with one family that illustrates this perfectly. 3 siblings inherited their parents' home after both of their parents had passed away. It was the house they grew up in. Every room held a memory. The kitchen still had the pencil marks on the pantry door where their parents measured their height as children. Their father's workshop was exactly the way he left it. Every weekend, they'd drive over with good intentions. One weekend, they'd clean the bedroom. The next weekend, they'd organize the garage. Then someone suggested updating the kitchen before selling. Another wanted to replace the flooring. Another wasn't even sure they wanted to sell at all. Nobody was trying to make a bad decision. In fact, everyone was trying to do the right thing. But nobody could agree on what the right thing actually was. Months passed. The house sat empty. The lawn still needed to be maintained. Insurance still had to be paid. Property taxes were still racking up. Then a small roof leak turned into ceiling damage. By the time they finally made a decision, they had spent thousands of dollars they never planned to spend. Not because anyone made a reckless decision, because nobody made a decision. One of the siblings said something I'll never forget. He looked around the house and quietly said, "I thought keeping the house was how we honored mom and dad. Now I realize they would have wanted us to make the smartest decision for our family, not the hardest one." That conversation has stayed with me for years, because that's when I realized something. Sometimes we think we're protecting the memories when we're really just protecting the emotions attached to those memories. Those aren't the same thing. The memories don't disappear because the house changes owners. The family history isn't stored in drywall or kitchen cabinets. It's carried by the people who live there. That's why I encourage families to slow down before writing the first check, before hiring contractors, before ordering flooring, before replacing countertops. Ask yourself one simple question. What is this money supposed to accomplish? If you don't have a clear answer, don't spend it yet. Because once the money's gone, it's almost impossible to get back. But even if you avoid unnecessary repairs, there's another cost that quietly keeps growing every single month. And most homeowners don't realize it's happening until it's already become expensive. Let me show you exactly what I mean. On an average home here in the Houston area valued around $400,000, here's what it actually costs to simply let that house sit while a family makes up their mind. Property taxes alone run close to $1,000 a month. Insurance is usually another $300. Utilities, even on a vacant house, can still run around $300 or $400. You still need the electricity running and the air conditioner working enough to protect the house from our humidity. And lawn care, another $75, because an overgrown yard is usually the first sign to the whole neighborhood that the house is vacant. Add that up, and you're at $1,775 a month, just for the house to exist. And that's before we even talk about the biggest number, which depends entirely on your situation. If there's still a mortgage on the property, the interest alone can easily run another $1,400 a month. And that's just the interest. Once you add the principal, you could have well over $2,500 leaving your pocket every month. Now, part of the principal is technically building equity, so it's not lost in the way taxes and insurance are, but it's still money going out the door while nobody's living there. If the home's paid off, you don't have that payment, but you may have $300,000 or $400,000 in equity sitting completely idle, quietly guarding an empty house instead of working for your family? So the honest answer is, it depends. But almost every family I've worked with is looking at least $1,775 a month at a minimum, and very often well over $3,000 a month once you account for their specific situation. Not because anyone did anything wrong, simply because indecision has a price tag. And most families never see the invoice until months later. Now, I'm not telling you this so you feel rushed. Rushing into the wrong decision is exactly what I want you to avoid. I'm telling you this so that when you do take a few weeks or even a few months to think clearly, you do it on purpose, not by accident. Once you've slowed down, separated the emotions from the finances, and resisted the urge to immediately start spending money, the next step is understanding your options. One thing I always tell homeowners is this: you don't have to make a decision today, but you do owe it to yourself to understand every option before you make one. And this next part is really the heart of it. It's the part I'd walk through with you if you were sitting across the table from me. So before we get into this, if any of this has been helpful so far, taking a second to subscribe generally helps me keep making these videos for families going through exactly what you're going through. That's all I ask. Now, let's get into your options, because this is where the confusion usually starts to clear up. Whenever I sit down with a homeowner, these are the 4 paths we walk through together. Think of them as 4 different roads. They don't all lead to the same place, and that's the point. The right road depends entirely on where your family is actually trying to go. Not because one is always better than the other, but because every family is different. The first path is keeping the home. For some families, that's exactly the right decision. Maybe you've always wanted to live there. Maybe the location's perfect. Maybe it fits your long-term financial goals. If that's your decision, wonderful. Just be honest about everything that comes with it. Owning a house isn't just owning an asset. It's accepting the responsibility that comes with that asset. The second path is turning it into a rental property. A lot of people immediately say, real estate always goes up. And historically, over long periods of time, that's generally true. But here's what people sometimes forget. Rental property is not passive income. It's an active business. You'll eventually have repairs, vacancies, insurance claims, late night maintenance calls, tenants who move out, tenants who don't. Now, some people genuinely enjoy owning rental property. I've worked with many investors who have built incredible wealth that way, but I've also met homeowners who became landlords almost by accident. I remember one gentleman who kept his mother's house as a rental because it felt like the responsible thing to do. A year later, he told me he'd gotten a call about a burst pipe at 11 o'clock at night, driven across town in the pouring rain to meet the plumber, and stood in his childhood kitchen at 1 in the morning, wondering how honoring his mother had turned into this. He wasn't a bad landlord. He just never actually wanted to be one. There's nothing wrong with admitting that you don't want a second job. The third path is listing the property on the market. If the home's in good condition, you're not under any significant time pressure, and maximizing your sales price is your primary goal, listing it may absolutely be your best option. In fact, there are plenty of situations where that's exactly what I recommend. One thing you'll probably notice if you watch more of my videos is that I'm never going to tell you selling directly to an investor is automatically the best answer. Sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. Good advice depends on your situation, not my business model. The fourth path is selling the home as is. This option often makes the most sense for homeowners who value certainty, convenience, or simplicity. Maybe the house needs significant repairs. Maybe you live in another state. Maybe the estate has become emotionally exhausting. Or maybe you're simply done watching thousands of dollars a month leave your family's pocket while you wait. Sometimes the most valuable thing you can buy isn't a higher sales price. Sometimes it's peace of mind. One thing I hope you've noticed throughout this entire conversation, I haven't tried to convince you that one path is better than another, because that's simply not true. The best path is the one that fits your family's goals, finances, timeline, and priorities. And that's exactly why I think so many homeowners ask the wrong question. They ask, Which option makes me the most money? Sometimes that's the right question, but not always. I think there's a better one. What does success actually look like for my family? Because once you answer that question, the right path often becomes surprisingly clear. Let me tell you about the other side of this, because I don't want you to leave thinking these stories only end one way. Over the years, the details change, but I've watched a version of this story play out many times, and it usually goes something like this. A family inherits a home. At first, they're overwhelmed, just like the siblings I told you about earlier. But this time, they slow down. They separate the emotional decision from the financial one. They get honest about what they actually want. And for one family in particular, the answer surprised even them. They decided to keep it. One of the adult children moved in, started raising their own kids in the same house they'd grown up in. And on the pantry door, a different house than the siblings I mentioned earlier, but the very same kind of doorway, a new set of pencil marks slowly started climbing higher with the next generation. For another family in that same situation, keeping it to live in didn't fit their lives at all, but renting it did. They found a steady long-term tenant, and that monthly income quietly helped put a grandchild through college. The house their grandparents worked their whole lives to pay off ended up doing one more generous thing for the family. Notice something about these families. Neither one sold, and I'm the guy who buys houses. But I'll tell you what they both had in common. It wasn't the path they chose. It was that they chose it on purpose with a clear head, instead of letting months of uncertainty choose for them. That's the whole difference. And that's the lesson I hope every homeowner remembers long after this video is over. As we wrap up, I want to leave you with one final thought. After helping homeowners through situations like this for nearly 20 years, I've noticed something. The families who feel the best about their decision a year later aren't necessarily the ones who made the most money. They're the ones who made the decision that was right for them. That's an important difference. Because there isn't a trophy for choosing one path over another. The goal isn't to win some imaginary real estate contest. The goal is to make the decision that best supports your family, your finances, and your future. I think that's where many homeowners unintentionally get stuck. They become so focused on maximizing the value of the house that they forget to maximize the value of their life. For one family, success might mean keeping the home because it truly fits their long-term goals. For another, success might mean selling it and paying off debt. For someone else, it might mean settling the estate quickly so everyone can begin moving forward. None of those decisions are wrong. They're simply different. And different goals naturally lead to different answers. Remember the first questions we asked at the beginning of this video? Should I keep it? Should I rent it? Should I sell it? Those are important questions, but they were never the most important questions. The better question has always been, what decision creates the best future for my family? Because once you understand that, the decision about the house usually becomes much easier. Whatever that means, keeping it, renting it, listing it, or selling as is, what matters most isn't the path you choose. It's that you choose it with clarity instead of uncertainty. If you happen to be here in the Houston area and you'd simply like another set of experienced eyes to help you think through your situation, I'd be happy to have that conversation. My details are in the description. Sometimes I recommend listing the property. Sometimes I recommend keeping it. Sometimes selling directly makes the most sense. And sometimes my advice is simply to slow down and wait. My goal has never been to pressure homeowners. It's to help them understand their options so they can move forward with confidence. Whether you ever work with Hero Homebuyers or not, I genuinely want you to make the decision that's right for your family. Because those decisions stay with us much longer than any real estate transaction ever will. And before you go, if part of your decision involves retirement or long-term financial security, or wondering where this property should play a role in your financial future, I made another video that I think you'll find incredibly valuable. In it, I explain why Larry Fink, the CEO of BlackRock, believes millions of Americans are facing a retirement gap they don't even realize exists. Understanding the bigger financial picture may completely change the way you think about this house and the role it should play in your financial future. I'll put that video right here. I think it's the perfect next step before making a decision this important. I'll see you over there. I'm Fred Paskell with Hero Homebuyers. Thank you for watching. Good day and God bless.